That was the last thing Richard said to his wife of 10 years before slamming the heavy oak door in her face. It was raining in Seattle that night, a cold, biting rain that soaked through Isabella's thin coat in seconds. Inside, she could hear the clinking of champagne glasses. Richard was celebrating his promotion with her, Camille, his 24-year-old assistant. He thought he had won. He thought Isabella was just a broke, helpless orphan he had rescued from a library job. He didn't know that the phone in Isabella's pocket contained a number she hadn't dialed in 12 years. He didn't know that the woman shivering on his porch was the estranged sister of the two most ruthless billionaire investors in New York City. Richard just made the most expensive mistake of his life. The sound of the lock clicking shut echoed like a gunshot in the quiet cul-de-sac of Mercer Island. Isabella Vance stood on the welcome mat. The Vances, Estor 2014. It read, a cruel joke now, shivering uncontrollably. The rain wasn't just falling, it was driving, hard and relentless, mixing with the mascara running down her cheeks. Inside the sprawling, $4 million modernist home, she could see the warm glow of the fireplace. Through the sheer curtains, the silhouette of her husband, Richard Vance, was visible. He was laughing. A moment later, another silhouette joined him, slender, poised, holding a flute of crystal champagne. Camille. Isabella clutched the garbage bag that held her life, 3 sweaters, 2 pairs of jeans, her toothbrush, and a photo of her late mother. Please, she had begged him 20 minutes ago in the kitchen. Richard, I have nowhere to go. My name is on the deed. The deed? Richard had sneered, adjusting his Cartier watch, a gift Isabella had saved for 3 years to buy him. The lawyers fixed that months ago, Bella. You signed the transfer when you signed those tax documents last spring. You own nothing. The car is company property. The accounts are frozen. You are a liability. And Camille is an asset. Camille had sat on the granite island, swinging her legs, looking at Isabella with pity mixed with triumph. It's just business, Bella. Richard needs a wife who fits his new image as CEO of Vance Logistics. You're just a bit too library, aren't you? Now, standing in the rain, the reality hit Isabella like a physical blow. 10 years. She had met Richard when he was a junior associate with student debt. She had worked double shifts at the Seattle Public Library to pay their rent. She had proofread his proposals, ironed his suits, and cooked his meals. When he started Vance Logistics, she was the one who stayed up until 4 a.m. packing the first shipments. And now, discarded. Like a wrapper. She walked down the long driveway, her cheap canvas sneakers squelching in the mud. A security patrol car slowed down as it passed her. The guard, a man she had waved to every morning for 5 years, looked at her with suspicion. She wasn't Mrs. Vance anymore. She was a vagrant in a rich neighborhood. She walked for 3 miles until she reached a 24-hour diner near the highway. Her hands were shaking so badly, she could barely hold the cup of coffee the waitress, a kind older woman named Marge, gave her for free. Honey, you look like you've been through a war, Marge said, sliding a glazed donut onto the table. I have, Isabella whispered. She reached into her wet pocket and pulled out her phone. 4% battery. She stared at the screen. She had no friends. Richard had slowly isolated her from them over the years, claiming they were bad influences. She had no money. Her credit cards had been declined at the ATM an hour ago. But she had a secret she had kept buried since she was 18 years old. A secret she ran away from to live a normal, quiet life, away from the suffocating pressure of her family's legacy. She opened her contacts and scrolled to the very bottom, to a blocked number she had saved simply as The twins. Her thumb hovered over the unblock button. If I do this, she thought, there is no going back. If I make this call, Isabella Vance dies, and Isabella Sterling is reborn. The image of Camille laughing in her kitchen flashed in her mind, the way Richard had looked at her, like she was nothing. Isabella pressed the button. The phone rang once, twice. "Speak," a deep baritone voice answered. "No hello, no, who is this?" Just a command. "Sebastian," Isabella's voice cracked. There was a silence on the other end, so profound it felt like the line had gone dead. Then the voice changed. The icy command melted into pure, terrified shock. "Bella, it's me, Bash. Alexander!" Sebastian shouted away from the phone, his voice echoing in what sounded like a cavernous room. "Get the jet, now. It's Bella." He came back on the line, his voice shaking with a suppressed intensity. "Bella, where are you? We've had private investigators looking for you for 12 years. We thought you were dead." "I'm in Seattle," she whispered, tears finally spilling over, hot and fast. "I'm at a diner called Randy's off the I-5. Sebastian, I made a mistake. I made a terrible mistake." "Are you hurt?" The voice was now cold steel again. "Who did it?" "My husband. He threw me out." "Husband?" Sebastian repeated the word as if it were a foreign concept. "You're married." "Not for long," she sobbed. "He took everything. He left me in the rain for his mistress. I have nothing, Bash. I'm homeless." "You are a Sterling," Sebastian said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You own half of Manhattan. You are not homeless. You are merely temporarily displaced. I don't want the money, I just need—" "You need us," Sebastian cut her off. "Stay exactly where you are. Do not move. If anyone touches you, tell them your name, your real name. Alexander is already contacting the flight crew. We will be there in 4 hours." 4 hours? "We're in London, Bella. We're taking the Gulfstream G650. We'll break the sound barrier if we have to." The line went dead. Isabella put the phone down. Her hands were trembling. She looked around the greasy diner. The trucker in the corner was staring at her. Marge was wiping the counter. They saw a wet, broken woman. They had no idea that the 2 men currently boarding a supersonic jet in London were Alexander and Sebastian Sterling, the twin titans of Wall Street, owners of Sterling Global, a conglomerate that quietly owned significant stakes in everything, from shipping to pharmaceuticals. Their combined net worth was estimated to be north of $40 billion, though Forbes often struggled to verify the full extent of their private assets. And they were known for 2 things: their Midas touch in business and their absolute, medieval ruthlessness when it came to protecting their own. Isabella sipped her coffee. For the first time in 10 years, she didn't feel afraid of Richard. She felt afraid for him. Richard Vance walked into his office, feeling like a king. The rain had stopped, and the Seattle skyline gleamed steel gray against the clouds. He smoothed his tie, a bespoke Hermes, and sat in his leather chair. "Good morning, Mr. Vance," Camille cooed, walking in with his double espresso. She was wearing a dress that was technically office attire, but definitely pushed the boundaries. "The lawyers sent over the final separation papers for Isabella. All you need to do is sign." "Excellent," Richard grinned. "Did she call? Beg to come back?" "Not a peep. Probably found a shelter by now." Camille giggled. "Or a library." Richard uncapped his fountain pen. "It's better this way. She was holding me back. Vance Logistics is about to go global. We have that meeting with the Japanese investors next week. I need a wife who can charm billionaires, not one who worries about coupons." He signed the papers with a flourish. "Richard Vance. It looks powerful." "Sir." The intercom buzzed. It was his secretary, Mrs. Higgins, sounding unusually frazzled. "What is it, Janet? I said no interruptions." "Sir, there are vehicles downstairs." "Vehicles? It's a logistics company, Janet. We have trucks." "No, sir. Black SUVs. A fleet of them. And there's a helicopter landing on the roof." Richard frowned. "I didn't authorize a landing. Who is it?" "They didn't say, sir. But security says the lead car has diplomatic plates." Richard stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Down on the street, traffic had been stopped. 6 black Cadillac Escalades were parked in a V formation right in front of the building entrance. Men in dark suits were pouring out, moving with military precision. "What on earth?" Richard muttered. Suddenly, the door to his office burst open. It wasn't security. It was a man Richard had never seen before. Huge, at least 6'5", with a scar running down his cheek. He wore a suit that cost more than Richard's car. "Mr. Vance?" the man said. It wasn't a question. "Who the hell are you? Get out of my office!" Richard barked. The man stepped aside. 2 men walked in. They were identical twins, perhaps 35 years old. They had the same sharp jawlines, the same ice-blue eyes, and the same air of absolute, terrifying authority. One wore a charcoal suit, Sebastian, the other a navy pinstripe, Alexander. They didn't look at Richard. They looked around the office with open disdain. "Quaint," Alexander said, picking up a cheap glass paperweight from Richard's desk and dropping it into the trash can. "Who are you people?" Richard shouted, reaching for his phone to call the police. Sebastian moved faster than Richard could blink. He slammed his hand down on the desk, shattering the glass surface. He leaned in, his face inches from Richard's. "We are the people who are going to teach you the definition of regret," Sebastian whispered. Behind them, a woman walked in. She was wearing a white trench coat, pristine and tailored. Her hair was blown out in soft waves. She wore oversized sunglasses. She took them off. Richard's jaw dropped. Camille gasped, dropping the espresso cup. It shattered on the floor, brown liquid staining the carpet. "Isabella?" Richard stammered. "But you... the rain." Isabella looked at him. Her eyes were dry. Her expression was unreadable. "Hello, Richard," she said softly. "I'd like you to meet my brothers." "Brothers?" Richard laughed nervously, looking between the terrifying twins and his ex-wife. "You don't have brothers. You're an orphan from Ohio. You told me you grew up in foster care." "I lied," Isabella said simply. "I wanted to see if someone could love me for me, not for my name. I guess I got my answer." "Her name," Alexander announced, stepping forward and adjusting his cufflinks, "is Isabella Marie Sterling. And as of this morning, Sterling Global Partners has acquired the majority debt of Vance Logistics." Richard went pale. "My debt? You can't—" "The bank wouldn't sell." "We bought the bank, Richard." Sebastian smiled. It was a shark's smile. "We bought the bank at 4:40 a.m. Then we called in your loans, all of them, due immediately." That's 40 million, Richard whispered. "I don't have that liquidity." "We know," Isabella said. She walked over to the desk, her husband's desk, and sat on the edge of it, looking down at him. "Which means, technically, we own this building. We own this furniture. We own that chair you're sitting in." She looked at Camille. "And we definitely don't approve of the staff." The silence in the office was broken only by the hum of the hard drive on Richard's computer being remotely wiped. "You can't do this," Richard stammered, backing away until he hit the window. "There are laws, wrongful termination, spousal support." Alexander Sterling laughed. It was a dry, terrifying sound. "Richard, you seem to be under the impression that this is a negotiation. It is an eviction." He snapped his fingers. 2 burly security guards from the Sterling team stepped forward. One of them held a cardboard box, a small, pathetic-looking thing. "Pack," Alexander ordered. "Personal items only. No company property. That means the laptop stays. The phone stays. And—" he pointed at Richard's wrist. "The Patek Philippe. The company paid for that as a signing bonus last year, didn't it? Hand it over." "This is robbery," Richard screamed, fumbling with the clasp of the watch. "It's asset recovery," Sebastian corrected, taking the watch and tossing it to one of the guards like it was a cheap trinket. Camille, realizing the ship was sinking fast, tried a different tactic. She smoothed her hair and walked toward Sebastian, dropping her voice to a sultry purr. She was used to men bending to her will. It was how she had gotten Richard after all. "Look," she said, batting her eyelashes. "I didn't know who she was. I was just doing my job. Richard is the one who made the decisions. Maybe I could stay on. I know where all the bodies are buried in this company. I could be an asset to you." Isabella watched from the desk. A week ago, this would have crushed her. Now she just felt a wave of nausea. Sebastian looked at Camille with the same expression one might use when stepping in gum. "Miss Camille," Sebastian said, his voice dripping with aristocratic disdain, "we are Sterlings. We do not employ home wreckers. And we certainly do not hire assistants who can't even make a decent espresso." He pointed to the stain on the carpet. "You're fired. And since you've been living in the company-leased apartment downtown, you have 2 hours to vacate before we change the locks." "2 hours?" Camille shrieked, her composure shattering. 1 hour and 59 minutes now. Alexander checked his watch. "Get them out of my sight," Isabella said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the room with a newfound authority. The guards grabbed Richard and Camille by the elbows. As they were frog-marched out of the glass office, past the rows of staring employees who were now whispering excitedly, Richard screamed back, "You'll regret this, Bella. You're nothing without me. You don't know how to run a business. The Japanese deal. You'll lose the Yamato contract without me." The elevator doors slid shut, cutting off his screams. Isabella let out a long breath she felt she had been holding for years. She looked at her brothers. "He's right about one thing," she said, her brow furrowing. "The Yamato deal. It's the only thing keeping this logistics company afloat. Richard was supposed to meet Mr. Yamato at the Emerald City Gala this Saturday to sign the contract." Alexander poured 3 glasses of scotch from Richard's private stash. "Then I suppose we'll be going to the gala." "But I can't," Isabella said, looking down at her trench coat. "Everyone there knows me as Richard's mousy wife, the library girl. They'll laugh at me." Sebastian walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Bella, you spent 10 years hiding in the shadows because you were afraid of our father's legacy. But you are a Sterling. It's time you stopped apologizing for it." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Get me the team from Milan, and call the jeweler. We need the vault opened. The family vault." He looked at his sister and smiled. "We aren't just going to the gala, Bella. We are going to conquer it." The Emerald City Charity Gala was the highlight of the Seattle social calendar. Held at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, it was a sea of black tuxedos, designer gowns, and fake smiles. Richard Vance stood near the entrance, looking frantic. He was wearing an old tuxedo he had dug out of storage. His bespoke one was locked in the house he couldn't access. Camille was beside him, wearing a dress she had bought off the rack at a department store because her credit cards had been frozen that morning. "Stop pacing, Richard," Camille hissed. "You're making me nervous." "I have to find Mr. Yamato," Richard sweated. "If I can get him to sign the deal with me personally, as a consultant, I can bypass the Sterlings. I can start a new company. I can sue them for everything." "You're delusional," Camille muttered, scanning the room for a richer target. People were whispering as they passed. The news of the hostile takeover had hit the business blogs that afternoon. Richard was no longer the golden boy of logistics. He was the man who got eaten alive by sharks. "Look at him," a socialite whispered, loud enough for Richard to hear. "I heard they kicked him out with nothing but the clothes on his back." "And the mistress?" Another laughed. "Trash attracts trash." Richard clenched his fists. Just wait, he thought. Once I close the Yamato deal. Suddenly, the murmuring in the room stopped. The string quartet fell silent. The air in the ballroom seemed to be sucked out. At the top of the grand staircase, the doors swung open. 3 figures stood there. On the left, Alexander Sterling, looking like a 07 villain in a midnight blue velvet tuxedo. On the right, Sebastian Sterling, sharp as a blade in all black. But it was the woman in the center who stopped hearts, Isabella. She was no longer the woman in the sensible cardigans. She was wearing a custom Versace gown of liquid gold that clung to her curves like a second skin. It was backless, daring, and screamed power. Around her neck sat the sterling star, a 40-carat yellow diamond necklace that hadn't been seen in public since her grandmother wore it to meet the Queen of England in 1985. Her hair was swept up, revealing a neck that held her head high. Her makeup was fierce, her eyes sharp. "My God," Richard breathed. He didn't recognize her. He had lived with this woman for a decade, and he had never really seen her. Isabella began to descend the stairs, flanked by her brothers. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Photographers were blinding them with flashes. Richard, fueled by a mix of desperation and stupidity, pushed through the crowd. He intercepted them at the bottom of the stairs. "Bella!" he shouted, putting on his best charming smile, though his eyes were panicked. "Bella, darling, you look incredible." The room went deadly silent. Everyone watched. Isabella stopped. She looked at Richard. She didn't look angry. She looked bored. "Mr. Vance," she said coolly, "I believe you're trespassing. Tickets were $5,000 a plate. I know for a fact your bank account is currently empty." "Bella, stop this," Richard hissed, stepping closer, trying to grab her arm. "We need to talk. Mr. Yamato is here. Don't blow this for us. You don't know how to talk to the Japanese. You'll embarrass yourself." Sebastian stepped forward, his hand twitching, but Isabella held up a hand to stop him. "You think I'll embarrass myself?" Isabella asked, a small smile playing on her lips. "You're a librarian, Bella. You organize books. This is high-stakes international business," Richard shouted, losing his cool. At that moment, an elderly Japanese man surrounded by an entourage approached. It was Mr. Yamato, the CEO of the tech giant. Richard spun around. "Mr. Yamato, thank goodness. Ignore my ex-wife. She's upset about the contract." Mr. Yamato walked right past Richard as if he were a ghost. He stopped in front of Isabella and bowed low, a sign of immense respect. "Konbanwa, Isabella-san," Mr. Yamato said. "It has been too long." The crowd gasped. Isabella bowed back, perfectly executing the angle of respect. "Hisashiburi desu, Yamato-sama," Isabella replied in flawless, elegant Japanese. "I trust your grandchildren are enjoying the rare books I sent them last year." Richard's jaw hit the floor. "Fluently," Yamato beamed. "You are the only one who could find such treasures. When your brother told me you were taking over Vance Logistics, I was relieved. I never liked doing business with—" he gestured vaguely at Richard. "Amateurs." Isabella smiled at Richard, a smile that was all teeth. "You see, Richard, while you were busy, working late, with Camille, I was reading, and learning, and maintaining relationships you didn't even know existed. She turned back to Yamato. "Shall we discuss the acquisition in the VIP lounge?" "We shall," Yamato agreed. As they walked away, leaving Richard standing alone and humiliated in the center of the ballroom, Isabella turned back one last time. "Oh, and Richard," she called out, "enjoy the hors d'oeuvres. It's the last free meal you're going to get." The morning after the Emerald City Gala didn't bring the sun. It brought a cold, grey drizzle that seemed to seep through the windows of the hotel suite Richard Vance was currently occupying. He woke up with a headache that felt like a rail spike had been driven through his temple. For a fleeting moment, as he stared at the high thread-count ceiling of the Grand Hyatt, he thought it had all been a nightmare. The eviction, the rain, the humiliating boardroom takeover, the gala where Isabella had looked like a goddess and treated him like a peasant. Then his phone vibrated on the nightstand. It didn't stop. It buzzed continuously, a frantic, angry rhythm. Richard rolled over, groaning, and grabbed the device. Twitter. "Yo, Vance's trash is trending #1 in Seattle." LinkedIn, 240 notifications. Richard Vance removed as CEO. CNBC. The fall of Vance Logistics. Sterling Global exposes mismanagement. He sat up, panic rising in his throat like bile. He looked over at the other side of the king-sized bed. It was empty. The sheets were cold. "Camille!" he called out. The bathroom door was open. The closet door was ajar. Richard stumbled out of bed, wearing only his boxers. He ran to the closet. His bespoke suits, the ones he had managed to grab before the house locks were changed, were gone. His leather duffel bag was gone. He ran into the living area of the suite. Camille was there, but she wasn't making coffee. She was struggling to zip up an oversized Louis Vuitton trunk near the door. She was wearing her sunglasses indoors, a sure sign she had no intention of making eye contact. "What are you doing?" Richard asked, his voice cracking. "Where are you going?" Camille didn't look up. She yanked the zipper shut with a violent zip. "I'm leaving, Richard. My Uber is 5 minutes away." "Leaving? Now?" "We're in the middle of a crisis." He stepped toward her. "I need you to call the PR firm. We need to spin the narrative about last night. If we tell them Isabella is mentally unstable, that her brothers are strong-arming the market." Camille finally looked at him. She lowered her sunglasses. Her eyes weren't filled with the adoration he was used to. They were filled with disgust. "You don't get it, do you?" she said, her voice dripping with ice. "There is no we. There is no narrative. You're done. You're radioactive." "I'm Richard Vance," he shouted, the veins in his neck bulging. "I built that company." "Isabella built that company," Camille corrected him, hoisting her bag onto her shoulder. "I saw the paperwork, Richard. I saw the forensic audit that leaked this morning. You didn't just mismanage funds. You were funneling money into shell companies in Belize. You were forging her signature on loan documents." Richard went pale. "How do you know about that?" "Because," Camille smiled cruelly, "I'm the one who gave the file passwords to Alexander Sterling's team." The room spun. Richard grabbed the back of the sofa to steady himself. You sold me out?" "They offered me a deal, Richard. Immunity, and a one-way ticket to Paris. Unlike you, I know when to jump off a sinking ship." She opened the hotel door. "Oh, and by the way, your credit card was declined for the room service. You might want to figure that out." The door slammed shut. Richard stood in the silence of the suite, the echo of the slam ringing in his ears. He was alone. Truly, completely alone. He scrambled for his phone again. He needed money. He needed to run. If Camille had talked, the Sterlings knew about the embezzlement. That wasn't just a lawsuit. That was federal prison time. He dialed his private banker in the Cayman Islands. A man named Lars who had promised him absolute discretion. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Richard cursed and dialed his lawyer, Stephen. Stephen had been his golfing buddy for 5 years. They had laughed over cigars about how easy it was to manipulate the tax code. "Stephen, pick up, damn it!" Richard hissed. The line clicked. "This is the office of Stephen Miller." "Stephen, it's Richard. I need—" "Mr. Vance," a cold, unfamiliar voice interrupted. "Mr. Miller is no longer with the firm. This firm has been acquired by Sterling Legal Holdings as of 8 a.m. this morning. We have been instructed to inform you that we are recusing ourselves from your counsel due to a conflict of interest." "You can't do that!" Richard screamed. "I paid you a retainer." "The retainer was paid using company funds from Vance Logistics," the voice said smoothly, "which, as you know, were stolen. Have a nice day." The line went dead. Richard dropped the phone. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. He walked to the window. Seattle looked grey and hostile. He checked his banking app. Checking 0.0. Savings, lower de 6 Investment portfolio, frozen. Court order. 4492. He had nothing. The watch on the dresser, a Rolex Daytona, was the only asset he had left. He grabbed it, his hand shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. He could pawn it. It would get him a plane ticket. Anywhere. Mexico, Thailand, somewhere the sterling influence couldn't reach. Then his phone chimed with a different sound, a priority email notification. Sender, Sebastian Sterling. Subject, checkmate. Richard's breath hitched. He sat on the edge of the unmade bed and opened the email. There was no text in the body of the email. Just a single attachment, a video file named thechoice.mpyok, and a PDF document titled Settlement Agreement, final.pdf. He tapped the video. The screen filled with the image of Sebastian Sterling. He was sitting in Richard's old office, Isabella's office, leaning back in the leather chair, looking relaxed, almost bored. Alexander was standing behind him, looking out the window, examining a document. "Good morning, Richard," Sebastian said. The audio was crisp, high definition. "I assume by now Camille has left you. She has a strong survival instinct, that one. We put her on a plane to France an hour ago. She won't be coming back." Richard stared at the screen, hate burning in his chest. "We are currently reviewing the Project Phoenix files," Sebastian continued, holding up a blue folder. Richard felt his stomach drop through the floor. That was the folder he kept in the safe behind the painting. The safe only he knew the combination to. "You really should use more complex passwords than your mistress's birthday," Sebastian deadpanned. "It took our IT guy about 4 seconds to crack it." Sebastian tossed the folder onto the desk. "Here is the situation. In this folder, we have evidence of 18 counts of wire fraud, 12 counts of embezzlement, and 1 particularly nasty count of identity theft regarding Isabella's trust fund. The federal prosecutors we spoke to, hypothetically of course, estimated a sentence of 20 to 25 years. You wouldn't do well in prison, Richard. You have soft hands." In the video, Alexander turned from the window. "He'd cry in the first week," Alexander added. "Agreed," Sebastian nodded. "Which brings us to your options. Isabella, for reasons I cannot fathom, believes in mercy. She does not want to see the father of her. Well, she doesn't want to see her ex-husband rot in a cell. It's bad PR." Sebastian leaned into the camera, his blue eyes piercing. "Option A. You delete this email. We send this folder to the FBI at noon. You are arrested before you can leave the hotel. Your face will be on every news channel in America as the man who stole from his wife to fund his mistress. Option B. Sebastian held up a finger. You sign the attached PDF. It is a full confession, which we will keep in a vault. It will only be released if you violate the terms of your new life. New life? Richard whispered to the empty room. You will leave Seattle immediately, Sebastian explained. You will surrender your passport. You will never speak to the press. You will never speak the name Sterling again. In exchange, we have set you up with a job and housing in a location where the cost of living is commensurate with your new skill set. Sebastian smirked. Open the PDF, Richard. Richard minimized the video and opened the document. He scrolled past the legal jargon, past the confession of guilt, down to the employment and relocation exhibit. Employer: Sterling Waste Management Solutions. Role: Junior Sanitation Associate, night shift. Location: Gary, Indiana. Housing: Company Dormitory. B, Unit 104. Salary: $14.50 hour. Richard gasped. Garbage? They want me to pick up garbage? He switched back to the video. It's an honest living, Richard, Sebastian said, as if reading his mind. Hard work. Keeps you humble. You'll be loading trucks. We own the company, so we'll know if you're late. We'll know if you steal so much as a paperclip. You have 10 minutes to electronically sign, Sebastian said, checking his watch. The FBI is on speed dial. The choice is yours. Be a felon or be a garbage man. Clock's ticking. The video ended. Richard sat frozen. The silence of the hotel room felt heavy, suffocating. 20 years in prison. He imagined the bars, the orange jumpsuit, the violence. He imagined the headlines. He would be the laughingstock of the financial world forever. Or Gary, Indiana. Anonymity. Poverty. Yes, but freedom. Kind of. He looked at the Rolex in his hand. If he signed the deal, he'd probably have to give that up too. He looked around the luxury suite he couldn't pay for. Tears of frustration and impotent rage pricked his eyes. He had been so close. He had the trophy wife, the company, the millions. And in 48 hours, it had all evaporated, because he underestimated the quiet woman who folded his laundry. Ping, a notification on the screen. 2 minutes remaining. His hand trembled as he tapped the Sign Here box on the screen. He used his finger to scrawl a shaky Richard Vance. He hit Submit. Almost instantly the phone rang. It was a blocked number. "This is Alexander," the voice said. "Smart choice. There is a grey Greyhound bus ticket in your email. It departs in 45 minutes. Do not miss it. Leave the watch on the nightstand. It belongs to the hotel for the bill you can't pay." "Alexander, please," Richard begged, his dignity fully gone. "I have no cash. How will I eat?" "There is a vending machine at the bus station," Alexander said coldly. "I suggest you check the couch cushions for change. Goodbye, Richard." The line went dead. Richard Vance, the man who thought he was a king, slowly stood up. He took off the Rolex and placed it gently on the nightstand next to the Bible. He walked to the door, carrying nothing but the clothes on his back, the same way he had sent Isabella out into the rain. He opened the door and stepped into the hallway. He didn't look back. 1 month later, the presidential penthouse, Four Seasons, Seattle. The view from the 41st floor was not just a view, it was a statement of ownership. The Seattle skyline, a jagged range of steel and glass, glittered against the obsidian waters of the Puget Sound. A month ago, this city had been a cold, wet prison for Isabella Vance. Tonight, it was her kingdom. Isabella stood on the balcony, the wind whipping the hem of her cashmere shawl, a garment woven from vicuña wool that cost more than the Honda Civic she had driven for the last decade. She wasn't looking at the view, though. She was looking at her reflection in the glass. The woman staring back wasn't the terrified librarian who had fled into the rain. She was sharper, harder. Her eyes held the same steel glint as her brother's. Inside the sprawling suite, The atmosphere was electric. The air smelled of Cuban cigars and victory. "To the Yamato deal," Alexander Sterling announced, his voice booming as he raised a tumbler of 50-year-old Macallan Scotch. "Closed officially at 4:00 p.m. today. $300 million. And the kicker? They gave us exclusive rights to their robotics shipping lanes for the next decade." Sebastian Sterling, lounging on a velvet sofa with the relaxed posture of a predator who has just eaten, shook his head in disbelief. "I still don't know how you did it, Bella. We've been trying to get a meeting with Yamato-san for 5 years. He wouldn't even return our emails. You walk in there, speak a few sentences of Japanese, and he hands you the keys to the kingdom." Isabella turned from the window. She didn't pick up her drink. She walked slowly into the center of the room, the heavy silence of her movement dampening her brother's celebration. "I didn't just speak Japanese, Sebastian," she said quietly. "I listened. For 10 years, while Richard was ignoring me to chase skirt, I read Yamato's memoirs. I studied his business philosophy. He values loyalty and legacy above profit. You two, you waltzed in there like conquerors. I walked in as a survivor. That's why he signed." Alexander lowered his glass, his smile fading. "Well, whatever the method, the result is undeniable. We own the logistics market in the Pacific Northwest. We can strip Vance Logistics for parts, absorb the client list into Sterling Global, and liquidate the rest by Monday." "No," Isabella said. The word hung in the air, sharp and absolute. The twins exchanged a look, that silent, telepathic communication that had terrified boardrooms from London to Tokyo. Sebastian sat up straighter. "No?" Sebastian repeated carefully. "Bella, the brand is toxic. Richard ran it into the ground. The name Vance is synonymous with fraud right now. If we liquidate, we recoup the debt and walk away with a massive profit. It's the smart play." "It's the Sterling play," Isabella corrected. "But it's not my play." She walked over to the coffee table and dropped a thick binder onto the marble surface. It landed with a heavy thud. The cover read, "Project Phoenix." "I'm not liquidating," she declared. "I'm rebranding, and I'm keeping the company." "To do what?" Alexander scoffed, pouring himself another drink. "Manage trucking routes, dealing with unions and fuel costs. Bella, you're a Sterling heiress. You don't need to get your hands dirty." "That is exactly why I need to do it." Isabella's voice rose, cracking with a decade of suppressed frustration. "Because for 12 years, I did get my hands dirty. I scrubbed floors, I stacked books, I balanced a checkbook where every cent mattered. And you know what? I liked it. I liked knowing that I survived on my own." She took a breath, her eyes darting between her two powerful brothers. "We need to talk, not about business, about us." The room went deadly quiet. The twins looked uncomfortable. Emotions were not their currency. Power was. 12 years ago I ran away," Isabella said, her voice trembling slightly. "Do you know why?" "Because you were young and rebellious," Sebastian dismissed. "You wanted to see the world?" "No." Isabella stepped closer. "I left because I couldn't breathe. You too, and Father, you suffocated me. You had private investigators following me to high school. You ran background checks on boys I wanted to go to prom with. You paid off my best friend to spy on me. I wasn't a person to you. I was an asset. A fragile doll that needed to be kept in a glass case." Alexander looked away, his jaw tightening. "We promised Mom. On her deathbed, Bella. We promised we would never let anything happen to you. So you built a prison and called it safety," Isabella countered, tears stinging her eyes. "I would rather have been poor and free than rich and owned. That's why I married Richard. Not because he was a good man. God knows he wasn't. But because he was my mistake. He was the one thing in my life that I chose for myself. And when he turned on me, when he threw me out, it hurt so much, because it proved that I couldn't escape. That maybe I was too weak to make it on my own. Sebastian stood up and walked to her. The imposing billionaire looked suddenly small. He reached out, hesitating, then placed a hand on her shoulder. "We didn't know," he whispered. We thought you were dead, Bella. When you vanished, we spent millions. We checked morgues, we checked hospitals. For 12 years, every time a Jane Doe was found in the tri-state area, I had to go identify the body, praying it wasn't you. We didn't want to control you. We just didn't want to lose you. A tear slipped down Isabella's cheek. She looked at her brothers, really looked at them, and saw the grey hairs at their temples, the lines of stress around their eyes. They were tyrants, yes, but they were tyrants who loved her. "I forgive you," she said softly. "But things have to be different now. The little Bella you knew is dead. She died in the rain on Richard's doorstep. The woman standing here is your partner, not your dependent, not your asset, your equal." Alexander set his glass down. He looked at her with a newfound respect, a gleam of admiration in his eyes. "Okay, partners. So, partner, what is this plan of yours?" Isabella opened the binder. "Vance Logistics is dead," she said, her voice strengthening. "The new company will be called Sterling Independent. And we aren't just moving cargo, we are changing the workforce." She flipped to a page showing a demographic breakdown. "I'm launching the Second Chance initiative," she explained. "We are going to partner with women's shelters across the state. We will provide jobs, subsidized housing, and legal aid to women who have been financially abused, displaced, or discarded by their partners. We will train them in logistics, management, dispatch, and IT. Sebastian frowned, his business brain kicking in. "That's noble, Bella. But the overhead, the training costs, the shareholders will revolt. It's a charity, not a business." "It's a brilliant business," Isabella countered sharply. "Think about it. Who works harder than a woman who has lost everything and is fighting to get her life back? Who is more loyal than an employee who knows you saved them from the street? We won't have turnover. We won't have corporate espionage. We will have an army of women who will work twice as hard as any man Richard ever hired. We will lower recruitment costs and increase efficiency through sheer loyalty." She looked at Sebastian. "And the PR? It will be gold. We will be the most ethical company in America. Yamato-san will love it." The twins stared at the binder. They looked at the numbers. Then, slowly, a grin spread across Sebastian's face. "It's aggressive," Sebastian mused. "It's risky. It's brilliant." "I own the bank," Isabella reminded them, a shark-like smile mirroring their own. "So I don't really care if the shareholders like it. I'm funding it myself." Alexander raised his glass again. "To Sterling Independent." Isabella clinked her glass against theirs. "To freedom." 6 months later, Gary, Indiana, Municipal Landfill Sector 4. The wind in Gary, Indiana, didn't just blow, it bit. It carried the scent of rotting garbage, burning rubber, and industrial decay. Richard Vance adjusted the strap of his heavy-duty trash bag. His back screamed in protest. He had lost 20 pounds in 6 months, not the healthy, gym-toned weight loss, but the gaunt, hollow look of stress and malnutrition. He was wearing a neon orange vest over a stained hoodie. His hands, once manicured and soft from signing checks, were raw, blistered, and permanently ingrained with dirt. "Yo, Vance!" Richard flinched. His supervisor, a man named Bukowski, who seemed to take personal pleasure in Richard's misery, leaned out of the garbage truck. "Quit staring at the seagulls and load the bags. We got 3 more blocks to clear before you get your 15-minute lunch break." I'm going," Richard muttered, grabbing a soggy bag that had split open. Coffee grounds and something that looked like old pasta spilled onto his boots. He heaved the bag into the crusher. As the compactor whirred, crushing the trash, Richard wiped sweat from his forehead. A car drove by, a sleek, silver Mercedes. For a second, Richard's heart leapt. He remembered the smell of heated leather seats. He remembered the quiet hum of an engine that cost 6 figures. He remembered the feeling of being important. The Mercedes didn't slow down. It splashed a puddle of grey sludge onto Richard's legs. He looked down at his soaked pants. He didn't even have the energy to curse. During his break, he sat on an overturned bucket behind the compactor to eat his sandwich, bologna on white bread, the cheapest thing at the gas station. He pulled a crumpled newspaper out of the trash heap next to him. It was a week old, but he had nothing else to read. His eyes froze on the business section. The headline screamed in bold black letters. "The Phoenix Rises. Isabella Sterling named Businesswoman of the Year." There was a photo. It was Isabella. She looked radiant, standing at a podium, cutting a ribbon with golden scissors. She looked powerful. She looked happy. And behind her, in the blurry background of the photo, was the logo of her new company, Sterling Independent. Richard read the caption. "Ms. Sterling attributes her success to resilience and the removal of toxic assets from her portfolio." Toxic assets. That was him. He was the toxic asset. Richard crumpled the newspaper. A laugh bubbled up in his throat, a dry, hacking sound that turned into a sob. He dropped the paper into the mud and buried his face in his dirty hands. "Vance!" Bukowski yelled. "Break's over. Get back to the trash." Richard stood up. He picked up his stick. He went back to work. Meanwhile, in Seattle, the flashbulbs were blinding. The grand ballroom of the Fairmont was packed, but this wasn't the shallow, gossiping crowd of the gala 6 months ago. The room was filled with women. Women in business suits, women in uniforms, women holding the hands of their children. Isabella Sterling stood at the microphone. She scanned the front row. There was Alexander, checking his watch but smiling. There was Sebastian, actually holding a baby, the child of one of their new operations managers, and looking terrified, but charmed. And there, in the VIP section, sat Marge, the waitress from Randy's diner. She was wearing a blue silk dress Isabella had bought for her. When she caught Isabella's eye, she gave a thumbs up. Isabella leaned into the microphone. The room went silent. 6 months ago, Isabella began, her voice ringing clear and strong, I stood in the rain with a garbage bag full of clothes and a heart full of fear. I thought my life was over. I thought that because I had been discarded, I had no value. She paused, looking at the faces of the women in the room, her employees, her partners, her sisters in arms. But I learned something that night. Rock bottom isn't a burial ground. It's a foundation. It is the solid ground where you build something that the wind cannot blow away. She gestured to the logo behind her. They say that living well is the best revenge. But I disagree. Revenge is for people who are still looking backward. I don't care about the past anymore. I don't care about the people who hurt me. She smiled, and it was a smile of pure, unadulterated sunshine. Happiness, Isabella said. Freedom, and the power to lift others up as you climb. That is not revenge. That is victory. She raised the golden scissors. To independence, she whispered. Snip. The ribbon fell. The crowd roared. Confetti rained down, gold and silver, shimmering like the rain on a Seattle street, but warm. Isabella Sterling walked down the steps, not into the arms of a man, but into the future she had built with her own 2 hands. And that is the incredible story of Isabella Sterling, from a shivering woman on a doorstep to the CEO of an empire. She proved that your current situation does not define your future worth. It's a brutal, satisfying reminder. Never mistake silence for weakness. Richard thought he was kicking out a helpless housewife, but he was actually unleashing a titan. He ended up in the trash, literally, while she built a legacy. I have to ask you guys a question, and be honest in the comments. Do you think Isabella should have forgiven her brothers? They controlled her life for years, but they came through in the end. Was 12 years of silence enough punishment for them? And what about Richard? Did the punishment fit the crime, or was the garbage dump too harsh? Personally, I think he got off easy compared to prison. Let me know your thoughts down below. I read every comment. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of drama, karma, and redemption, please hit that like button. It really helps the YouTube algorithm show this story to more people. And if you haven't already, subscribe and ring that bell. We have an even crazier story coming next week involving a hidden heir and a stolen wedding. You do not want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you step on while you're climbing up, because you might meet them on your way back down. Stay safe, everyone.